right. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is David Patrick Harry with Church of the Eternal Logos, and I have a very special guest today. Welcome, Father Michael Butler. Thank you so much for coming on. How you doing today?
It's a good day, and a better day for talking with you and your people, too.
Well, it's our people, but yes, thank you so much. For some watching who may not be familiar with what you're doing, I came across your content through Instagram and TikTok. You talk a lot about masculinity and promoting masculinity. You yourself are into bodybuilding, and you're an Orthodox priest, and you're an American convert. And so there's so many aspects of your own identity and who you are that relate to so many of the young people like myself and people watching this stream. And I thought the advice you give to people is so concise, it's clear, it's useful, it's pragmatic. And I thought today we can just talk a little bit about who you are so more people can engage with you, your journey to Orthodoxy, how you got into bodybuilding, fitness, and then how all this relates to your work online and regarding to masculinity and being a men's coach.
Very good. Well, that's a mouthful, but yeah, I when you say it, it sounds impressive. Somehow I managed to squeeze it all into 24 hours every day, and run a growing parish. Thank God.
And where is your parish?
I'm in Livonia, Michigan, which is a northwest suburb of Detroit.
Okay, well, I'm down just south of Indianapolis, so we're not too far away.
You're not too far.
Yeah.
Nah.
Well, maybe to open up then, if you could discuss a little bit about who you are and how you got into Orthodoxy and your sort of liturgical life, clergy life, all this stuff.
Okay. Yeah, I am as Patrick says, I'm a convert. I have been Orthodox for 37 years now, I think. I came to Orthodox. I had been raised Roman Catholic. My father died when I was 8 years old, and my mother says that I stuck my nose in a Bible and never took it out after that, which honestly I don't remember. She was Catholic, and I remember going to Mass as a boy. She got mad at God when Dad died and quit going to church, and I just continued to want to go to Mass. And when I was in junior high, my mother had remarried quickly. She's 28 years old. She was a widow and had 2 young children. And she remarried, and my stepfather was from South Texas. So I grew up near Galveston on the Texas Gulf Coast. That's where I'm from. And we moved down to South Texas on the Mexican border, and I fell in with a bad crowd and was stealing from the school and acting out in other ways and got caught. And really went to confession for the first time in my life. And I don't remember the confession, but it was the 4th of February, 1975 at 4:55 in the afternoon. It was a Friday. And I walked out of Our Lady of Sorrows Catholic Church in McAllen, Texas. And it's subtropical, it's like Florida in South Texas. So February is not like what we know here in the north.
Right.
It was very mild. It was probably 70, 75 degrees, at the time. And the world changed. The light went golden. I heard the sound that creation sings to its maker. I can't describe it other than somehow grass is soprano and trees are bass. That's all I can say. But I knew in an instant that there was a God, that he was personal and that he loved me. And it turned me inside out. And I have lived the rest of my life out of gratitude for that moment. So, when you're a good Catholic boy, you want to be a good Catholic boy, then you, of course, want to become a priest. Well, that was sort of the trajectory of my life. I went to University of Dallas, which is a Catholic liberal arts school, a very good school. And I took my undergraduate degree in psychology. In those days, archetypal psychology.
Okay.
We had James Hillman was the department chair at the time.
Okay.
So I have a good background in all of that. And of course, in all research, there is me search. So, I was in psychology, I was trying to figure out who I was and what I was and all of this. And I thought about doing some clinical work in psych. And we had this hotshot young professor that come down from Duquesne University in Pittsburgh. Just loved the guy. And I thought, let me go check out Duquesne and see about graduate work in clinical psych. So I went up to Pittsburgh for a visit and discovered something we didn't have in Texas, which was a Byzantine Rite Catholic Church. And, onion domes.
Yeah.
Pittsburgh's full of onion. If you've been there, it's just full of onion domes. So there's Uniates, Byzantine Rite, there's, Ruthenians and Ukrainians and all sorts of Orthodox. And I went to liturgy for the first time at a Byzantine Rite Catholic church, and I was astonished. This was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen in my life. Why has this been kept from me? And I went back to Texas all on fire for this thing, and there were no Byzantine Rite at the time. And so I thought, well, if I'm going to learn about the Eastern Church, I can visit the Orthodox. So I visited St. Seraphim Cathedral there in Dallas. It was a Wednesday night Vespers, and immediately fell in love with it. And, I really did. I struggled hard. I laid awake for 6 weeks wondering if I could convert from Catholicism to Orthodoxy. And this was one of the first times in my life where I followed my heart instead of my head.
Mm.
It was one of the best decisions I ever made. And I never looked back. And for a little while, the desire to be a priest sort of went away because, I don't know, the fullness of Orthodox life is pretty sufficient.
Yeah.
But, but for me, I think there is a burden. There was a calling on me, and I needed to do that. So eventually, sort of as a late vocation, I went ahead, I pursued my PhD in church history and patristics at Fordham University. Wow. The Holy Synod decided I had enough education and allowed me to be ordained a deacon. So I was ordained a deacon at St. Seraphim by the late Archbishop Dimitri, of whom may we be worthy of his prayers. And then I ended up in Michigan. My wife is from Michigan. You marry a Yankee, you end up in the North. Warning, guys, that it can happen. So I've been in the North for 30 years now. And I was ordained a priest here for a parish in Michigan, a small parish. Then I spent 15 years in Cleveland at a parish there. I like to say for my sins, but I have atoned. The parish in Olmsted Falls was actually a beautiful place, and we managed to double the size of it and do some wonderful work there. But we have no roots in Cleveland, and it was just, we were sort of alone while we were there. So we managed to come back to Michigan when a parish assignment opened up here. So here I am in suburban Detroit. I've been a priest now 27 years. Wow. The parish is wonderful to me. We are seeing a continuous inflow of young men, mostly single. And I know this is happening all over the country. It's absolutely fascinating to me. I have had, in the last 5 months, there has been 3 Sundays only when I did not have a new person come to join the church.
Wow.
I've never seen anything like it before. Sunday, a young man, Orthodox a year, married a year, moved up from Georgia to join the parish. Monday, I get a phone call from another young man who moves in from New England for work, bringing his whole family. There's 5 of them that are serious inquirers and had been in New England and are looking now for a church to join. So they're 6 in 48 hours,
Wow.
It's just been like this lately, and about all I do is kind of process and work with new people. So, this has been it. So a long-standing interest in men's work. I've been interested in that since before Robert Bly wrote Iron John back in 1990. I remember that. I was looking forward to it. I'd heard echoes of, that something was going on out in California in the Mendocino woods, and there's this Robert Bly guy, this poet was shaking down stuff in the wilderness, and men drumming and all this sort of stuff. You could not find out anything. It was fascinating to me. And so I've been a long student of both the Mythopoeic men's movement. I followed John Eldridge's rise when he wrote Wild at Heart. Richard Rohr, Roman Catholic priest, does men's rites of passage. He does some extraordinarily good stuff with ritual. And my interest in that's just sort of multiplied out. So now I'm one of the founders and overseers of the St. Paisios Brotherhood, which is an Orthodox online men's community. It's got a nice presence on Telegram. We have a really good moderated group there. Full disclosure also, I am a mentor for Ryan Mickler's Iron Council as part of the Order of Man. I oversee a number of battle teams there, and I'm fairly well known, in those circles as well. And I've done a couple of years in Denmark at the European Men's Gathering, where I served as a ritual elder, which is very much outside my, sort of my professional role, but it was a whole lot of fun. And I helped to put together some rituals for some, for men who are not really Christian. In fact, overtly neo-pagan in some cases. They're fun regardless. I know how to deal with these guys, and we get along okay. But that was some really, really interesting work that I was able to do there as well. So I know that as I get closer to retirement, I'm 61 now, and I hope to be able to get out of full-time parish ministry in a few years' time. And I'm too busy, I'm too active, I can't just sit still. So I thought, let me begin to lay the groundwork for some individual and group online men's work, some coaching, some retreats, some workshops, some conferences. And so through this, that, and the other, I made acquaintance with Bedros Keuilian.
Oh, okay.
Bedros,
Yeah.
Buddy Boot Camp, modern day night program, all of that sort of stuff. I helped organize a conference last December down in Cancun, and he was one of the men that was there to help pull some stuff together. And I sat next to him for 3 days. He took a liking to me for some reason, and so he's coaching me on how to set up my own online business. And so it's because of that, that's why, I am on Facebook and YouTube and mostly Instagram, and God help me, TikTok. But he told me, this is how you build a base, right, and this is how you get followers, and you begin to establish your message and your sort of social media persona and your presence, so that then when you begin to offer, paid content, that there is a base, which would be interested in what you have to say. Right. So that's a real slow project for me. I have a full-time job now. It's plenty for me now, but again, I need to start laying the groundwork and beginning to develop that. So that's kind of what I do. So I fill my days with either doing priestly work and pastoral ministry and receiving new people, or working on men's work and men's content, doing a lot of Zoom calls with men, or I'm in the gym pumping iron.
There we go. I love
that.
That's it.
That's what I do.
And so let's get into the sort of masculinity and the need and the influx of young men coming into Orthodoxy, because that is absolutely a fact. Here online, just with people doing apologetics, I know that online Orthodoxy totally towers over the actual numbers we have in the U.S. population. I think we're less than 2% of the U.S. population, yet in regards to online Christian apologetics, online Christian content, Orthodoxy is one of the strongest.
We are there. There is some force there. When I was young, I did a lot of apologetic stuff. Somehow, the older I get, it just seems tiresome to me now. I don't know that I have the energy for that anymore. Well, and I no longer feel the need to fight the Catholics and the Protestants and the whomever. It just agreed.
People have different callings, and but finding your calling again is part of this kind of journey into your own masculinity. And so, let's speak real broadly and then narrow into the phenomenon that you're seeing as a priest. But some of the stuff that I've talked about here online is, men, metaphorically speaking, are the castle walls. And so women and children are the jewels. We define boundaries. We define the borders of things, and we are erect, and we stand, and we protect. And as we look at gender ideology, the dissolution of national boundaries, the dissolution of difference between man and animal, female, male, all these things are actual spiritual and much deeper metaphysical attacks on distinctions and boundaries themselves, which is the ultimate fight against masculinity, which is ratcheting up. It's like the men then, especially in the Western world, are the frogs in the pot. The heating up, the temperature is that all the boundaries that maintain order are dissolving, creating more and more chaos and a lack of self-identity. And so that's then you get the neo-pagans, because the easiest way is just to revert back to, okay, I have a European identity. I'm interested in German paganism. I'm interested in Nordic paganism. I'm interested in Druidism now, because there's a sort of immutable identity in regards to who I am and my ethnicity.
There is some of that, and it also has, some really macho kick-ass images of God.
Yeah.
Which I think, sort of the constant gentle Jesus, meek and mild, really is in some of its Protestant expression especially is so saccharine. If that's what I was presented with, if that was my only introduction to Christianity, I might not be Christian myself.
Right.
It's just kind of icky.
Right.
And
One of the last refuges then of masculine Christianity is, I would argue, orthodoxy.
oh yeah,
And finding for young men then, whether it be the neo-paganism, they sort of become their own priests. But the real search these young men are on is the submission to an authentic authority, which ultimately is God, which then is ultimately Christ, which is ultimately then the priesthood of orthodoxy. And so maybe you can speak then to the cultural phenomenon that you think is catalyzing these young men coming to the Orthodox Church that you're then dealing with and also reaching out to.
all right. What I'm seeing, or the way that I'm hearing it and have sort of formulated it, is that, as you say, life is chaotic.
Mm-hmm.
The world is chaotic. It's unsure. As you talk about a dissolution of boundaries, I think that's absolutely true. And just to riff very theologically for a second, the very act of creation in Genesis 1 and 2 is precisely the articulation of boundaries and distinctions between things.
Right.
So it is a fundamentally spiritual battle here, and it's directed mostly against the logos.
Right.
Because the logos is the word that distinguishes and makes differences, while the spirit is the unity that holds everything back together. So I think it's precisely a revolt against Christ. But that is, by the way, because I think a lot of young men they've experienced chaos. There's not been good boundaries. There's not been good structure. They are looking for that in their lives. And as they where I'm seeing a lot of young men, 25 to about 33, 34, somewhere in there, they've sort of successfully launched. It's not a failure to launch. I mean, in a few cases, I think that is. You still get sort of the mean guy, who's laying in his parents' basement, playing video games, jerking off to porn covered in crusty tissues and Cheetos dust. I mean, that's we make fun of that because, alas, there is a little bit of truth to it.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Unfortunately, yeah. But for most guys, I think are doing okay, but they know there's something missing, and and I think sort of my current thinking is that they're not able to get from late adolescence into early adulthood. And part of it, if I can speak sort of in mythic or mythopoetic terms for a moment, they really are just exactly as you say. They're looking for the Father, ultimately for the Heavenly Father. But I think more immediately, Dad 2.0.
Right.
Because if you think about it, living in the basement, what is it all? Living in the basement, a dark, enclosed place where all of your needs are taken care of, all of your needs are met, very comfortable. Sounds rather like a womb.
Yeah, it's an archetypal womb.
It's an archetypal womb, which is also a tomb because you'll die there if you don't ever get out.
Oh, okay. Great point. Yep.
But it's a womb. There's still there's still some aspect of needing to be born, of stepping out of what's comfortable and old, what's ordinary and warm and comfy, into something that's scary and new. And they're having trouble making that leap. And so they're looking for help with that. In fact, I think the entire contemporary self-help movement is an attempt to find their Father and to get over this lump, looking for some way to learn how to be responsible, how to be autonomous, how to take control of your own life, and how to live that to the fullest. Because, too many are the whole participation trophy ethos, so where nothing was really expected of young people. And I don't say that to lay any kind of blame. I'm not blaming mom or dad or absent father. I'm not saying that young people have been lazy. There's no sense to lay any kind of blame any there. It's just a situation that sort of the ethos or the culture that's kind of been there. And so when young men step up and want to live a life, or a lot of the single young men who come to my parish, they're really of an age where they say, I really like to settle down and where are all of the women? Because I've had like 2 women come to the church and like nearly 24 young men, and the men are grossly outnumbering the women. But they want to get married and they're not sure how. Their relationship skills are not there. Their social skills are sometimes lacking. They're a little awkward. Sometimes they're doing real well financially. They've got their degree. They've been through college, starting their jobs, maybe entry-level salaries, maybe huge college debt. So a lot of guys are operating on, you're already got like 1 strike against you at least, coming out of the gate.
Right.
And so I think a lot of these things sort of come together, and they sort of realize they need help. And then when they get into the world, they realize everything is twice as hard, takes twice as long, and costs twice as much to get done.
Right.
And I think a lot of guys just sort of, my God, I had no idea it was this rough. I am not prepared, to operate in this world.
And then the rhetoric from the boomer generation who, oh, well, I went to school, I worked during the summer and paid off my year of tuition. Well, that was possible. One, when the dollar was worth more. Two, when tuition was $6,000 for a year, you could do that. But now so then these young men, there be the criticisms to them, they feel like are totally unjustified because that reality that I can work for the summer or pay off my school, or I don't, they don't even want to play the game because they don't see the upside in participating in it.
That's right. And the what is it? The juice isn't worth the squeeze.
Right.
I'll date myself. When I started college in 1979, you could attend the University of Texas at Austin for $4 a credit hour. Wow. Swear to God, $4 a credit hour. Wow. So any course would cost you $12 to take.
That's crazy.
I mean, there's no ability. You can't even relate to that nowadays.
Right. Yeah.
But such as the world we're in. Right. So I think there is a real looking for, as I say, Dad 2.0. I think a real need for mentors, a real need for adult men to realize that the younger guys still need something. And I've sort of reached the point in my life where I say, okay, I'm comfy with myself. I've got enough self-assurance. I've got enough experience under my belt where I think I can speak with a little bit of authority and help these guys out. And so that's kind of what I've been trying to do on the social media and put forth this persona. Like I very often say on my little coffee talks, stuff you should have learned from your dad or your granddad.
Right.
And, and guys are eating it up.
But that's been a systematic attack. I mean, you look at the first experiment in 1964 with welfare in the black community, that the women got paid to have children and not have men in the home. And so that has basically been an experiment that now is run for the entire nation at large now. Yes. And so, I mean, I would imagine many young men that you probably deal with didn't even grow up with dad because they got divorced at some point and they spent majority of their time with their mother. And then the entire society is feminizing us. The chemicals in the food is feminizing us. Everything's feminizing us. And there's very few role models to look up to fight against it.
It's true. It's I wouldn't want to be 20 again for all the tea in China, or have to face the dating market nowadays. Right. I really feel for guys. I really do. And especially with issues like chronic masturbation, addictive pornography, and that sort of stuff.
Yep.
Look, we hit puberty at 13. Most guys are not even able to get married or even thinking about settling down till they're 30. What are we supposed to do for 17 to 20 years when men are at their sexual peak, at their physical, peak, and yet there's no opportunity for release? I have no answer to that. I appreciate that it is a huge problem, and the church really needs to step into its role fully as a hospital. I don't use that lightly, but really to bring out all of the means available to us, sacramentally, iconographically, scripturally, everything, in order to provide a place of healing for the guys who have been caught in this stuff for so long. It's been a commonplace for me to say, so I'll just go ahead and say it here. Yeah, 15 to 20 years of smoking weed, playing video games, and jerking off to porn is not a really good preparation for life.
Right.
And, guys are kind of coming up to that and hitting it and are not really sure what to do. So they start looking around. They start looking at the church. They start looking at men's work. Nobody comes to men's work except in pain. And I will lay you odds that no one comes to Orthodoxy who's not in pain in some way.
Right.
And so we have the walking wounded who are coming in our doors, dragging their guts behind themselves, and a real sense of compassion for where these guys are coming from, to understand what a seeker is and what he's looking for, goes a long way.
Right.
And my own background in archetypal psychology helps that. I understand the archetype of initiation. I know what they're looking for.
Right.
And so I've been able to help provide that.
I love that emphasis on suffering. One, obviously, that's how we grow as Orthodox Christians, how we become more Christ-like. But also in regards back to the bodybuilding, I mean, men in general, everything we do, and this was something in one of the videos I saw you talk about in regards to the necessity of resistance. As a man, that's how I define myself in every single thing that I do, no matter what it is. But your physical fitness is obviously one of the easiest ones in that when you look at a man and say he has a nice stature, a nice physique, that is only created through his body, and since suffering, being tormented, tension on the muscles for long periods of time. It's you're forming a body that can withstand suffering, and that's what you're looking at. And so speak maybe then to how the physical fitness, your own journey into bodybuilding, and how this ties back into your orthodoxy, how this ties back into masculinity, and how this is something that's really lacking in our culture.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We thrive. I think I said it that in one of my little talks. Men are like working dogs. We're happiest when we're fighting against resistance. When we've got something to do, we have a purpose, when we have meaning. And a lot of young men are not really finding a lot of meaning in their jobs, in their work. I had conversation happened upon an emergency room physician a couple of weeks ago who just decided, had been all through school and specialized in emergency room medicine and all, and discovered that he really hates his job. There's not really much you can do. It's not like you can just switch into family practice when you're an ER physician. It's just, but a lot of guys are not really happy with what they're doing and have to learn to live with that. For myself, I'm going to date myself. Okay, so when I was a little boy, we read comic books back in those days, and I don't know if people read comic books anymore. But in the back of the comic books, there were ads, and there was this ad by Charles Atlas, who was an old classical sort of strong man, early bodybuilder from like the 40s and 50s. And there was this little cartoon sequence, the guy lying on the beach getting sand kicked in his face by the book. You remember that one? Okay, I saw that. I was like 8 years old, and I saw this little cartoon, and that was the same year my dad died. So I think this is why it was so impactful for me. Okay, and I said, I want to look like Charles Atlas. That man is strong. Maybe he's strong enough not to die. I don't know. There is deep stuff in here for me. This is not the place to tease that out. But from the time I was about 8 years old, I wanted to look really good, and I admired that. And after Dad died, I got depressed, and I became the fat kid. And I was the fat kid all through school. I was the guy picked last in PE every single time. I almost failed PE in second grade because I was so uncoordinated I couldn't jump a rope.
Wow.
It was that bad. And so to this day, I hate team sports. If I don't hate them, I have absolutely no interest in them whatsoever. Ask me to recite the names of the Detroit sports teams. I can't get them all together because I just can't pay attention to them. But I stayed sort of that way. I lost some weight in high school and felt a lot better. Got married when I was 23, 24, put on 15 pounds when my wife was pregnant, that sort of stuff. Had the dad bod. And yet always, I was the guy in the gym. I like to go to the gym. I still always sort of entertain the idea that I'd really like to get into really good shape. But I was sort of the middle-aged guy who was always lifting weights and never got any stronger, was always on the elliptical cycle and somehow never lost any fat. And I was really intimidated by the really big guys. I really was. Just, it was hard to be in the same room with some of them for me because I was so ashamed of my own body and, my own lack of fitness and all. And this went on for quite a while, and really until I was about 53. And then I decided, I'd wanted to get in shape all my life, and damn it, I regretted not doing it when I was 20, 30, 40, and 50. I want to regret something else when I turn 60. So this is the truth. So I said to my wife, I found an online, transformation coach, one of those 12-week transformation programs. And I said, I want to sign up for this. Are you willing to change how we eat and what you cook me for dinner and to support me in this? And she said, yes. And I worked with this guy, and oddly enough, I wasn't eating it right. I wasn't eating nearly enough protein. And He laid out the workouts, he laid out the meals, I followed the plan. Lo and behold, muscle started going on and fat started coming off. And when I finished with him, I had lost about 13 pounds. And I said, I ain't done. How far can I carry this? Because I really like a deadline. You know, I've pushed myself academically. I pushed myself spiritually. Now, finally, at 53 years old, I decided I'm going to push myself physically. Let's see where I can go with this. And I said, let me find a local coach. Mm-hmm. I can do a show. I'll do a men's physique, you know, because they wear board shorts. I figured I could wear board shorts. I would be comfortable with that. So I found a coach, and he said, I can't guarantee that you'll win, but I can make sure you look like you belong on stage. You got a deal. So we picked the very last possible contest here in Michigan. It was in November, and he worked with me for another, 3 months. I lost 40 pounds. I went from a 39-inch waist to a 32. I went from 23% body fat to 8. And all I wanted was not to come in last. And I was 5th out of 6. I was not last. I was not last.
Mission accomplished.
But I kind of got hooked on it, you know, and realized that, even at an older age, you can still change your body for the better. So, right. You know, if you have any older listeners there, no, you're not too old for anything. Stop that. That's a useless excuse.
Right.
You know, don't even say that. You can still change your body. Even today, I will never look like Patrick because I'm not his age. Okay. But I'm one of the best built 61-year-old men you'll ever meet. And, you know, that's enough. And so I continued to compete, and I do to this day. And probably I will retire next year because the arthritis, you know, it's in my neck, it's between my shoulders, it's in my thumb. My knees hurt all the time, and I'm just sort of beating myself up now. But It's been really good. And so what I found through that was as I began to lose the weight, the women in my parish quit giving me so much shit, and I started getting more respect from the men. And I said, what is this? And you couldn't really tell that much, especially in parish life, because I wear a cassock. You know, it hides everything really well. But it was the self-confidence. I was doing what I wanted to do. I was changing my body. I was seeing success. I was making progress. I was doing what I said I was going to do. And all of that came out in this incredible rush of self-confidence, which I remember feeling. It changed the way I stood. It changed the way I talked. It changed my entire self-presentation. And everybody else around me responded to that. And it made my life a lot better. Had I known that it would make my life better like that, I might have done this decades ago.
Right.
You know, and saved myself a whole lot of grief.
Right.
But that was it. And so I found that I use my workouts as my sort of my asceticism.
Right.
This is my ascetical practice. It's physical. It's hard, as you know, as any of your listeners know who lifts weights. You know, when you're deadlifting 315, it's real hard to think about anything else.
Right.
And it just, you know, it clears my mind. It gives me focus and clarity. It gives me something to do with my anger or my bitterness or whatever might be under my skin that day. And I think I'm a better man for it.
Right. There's a couple points I'd like to dive into there. One is the aggression, anger, and intensity, which I want to speak to that here in just a moment. But well, in fact, let's just dive into that one. You know, the weights for me, especially as an Orthodox man who is not having sex. Now, I feel like I'm in the best shape of my life. I probably have the highest T levels I've ever had in my life. And at the same time, I am being more constrained with myself at any other point in my life. And so we are not monks. And so I guess here's the other point I want to tie into it is that I've received some of the criticism from Orthodox people because they basically their approach towards Orthodoxy is a young person as being a sort of monastic in the world. And to some degree, you know, monasticism works if you're a monastic, but if you're trying to get married, which ironically is the same people that often criticize me for promoting physicality or dressing well or taking care of your appearance, that these are very superficial things, and that if I was truly Orthodox, why would I care about physicality? Why would I care about my body? I'm concerned with spirit and soul. Well, one, these are all tied together, but two, I'm also not an ascetic. We are ascetic through the liturgy, through our fasting, through different means. But I'm a man in the world, and I'm trying to prepare myself, one, to be a conduit for God, but also to be the absolutely best version of myself, because that only helps the people around me.
Exactly.
And that then aids in my own spiritual development. And when I find a wife, I'm going to be able to be that man that has acquired the discipline, those skill sets to be the person. So the woman that I'm going to be with, I am the man that she would want to be with. And so there's a different mentality being Orthodox in our approach to asceticism. One, being in the world versus an actual monastic. And so I guess first speak to the criticism of, oh, well, it's not very Orthodox to focus on your body or be a bodybuilder. And then two, how as a man it's necessary to find a way to release that physical energy, that somatic energy, and in a way through some type of aggressive means, an intense means. And I think weightlifting is a perfect way for that.
Yes. Actually, I could not have said it better myself. You summarized it very well. And I think for myself, it's always been difficult. Again, having a PhD in patristics, I had spent 30 years reading the Fathers.
Right.
And most of our spirituality, our spiritual literature is monastic. And so people read that, I'm always amazed. Catechumens reading the Philokalia.
I know it.
God in heaven, please. It's like the late Father Tom Hopko of happy memory used to say, oh, everybody's interested in the Jesus prayer, but nobody's interested in Jesus and no one's interested in prayer. Yeah, it's exactly right. But you cannot simply take monastic literature. It's fungible into a lay lifestyle directly. There has to be some application and some interpretation, some modification there. We're not in obedience to an abbot. We're not living in a community. We are not separated from the world. We do not have vows of poverty, chastity, and our obedience and stability. We do not have 8 hours of prayer every day, in public. Not including our private rules of prayer. So there is a huge number of supports, boundaries, and resources that are not available to us living in the world. So our spirituality of necessity must look different. And as my late spiritual father, the Archimandrite Roman Braga, pointed out, he says the American character is, we were probably not going to produce great hesychasts anytime soon. He said the American character is much more active. Mm-hmm. When he came to America, he was amazed. He says, this country has, airplanes filled with medical supplies waiting, for a crisis to happen somewhere in the world. And if anybody stands in need, the American planes will be the first ones that will take off and arrive there to offer help. This is just part, as a Romanian coming to the U.S., this was his reflection on our character. And I think he's right. I think even Orthodox spirituality in this country is much more active. And so, we'll keep our rule of prayer, but there needs to be physical aspects to it as well. And physical aspect of the kinetic, constant moving, the bows, the prostrations, the crossing ourselves, the standing, and all of that, I think is part of the appeal that Orthodoxy has, especially for young men. And integrating that into our spiritual life, I think is, as you said, is helpful. And it's the way that I think Orthodox spirituality can work very well that way. Mm-hmm. Also, what you learn, as anybody who's been in the gym for any length of time, the things you learn, the virtues you learn from the gym or from a rigorous martial arts program are fungible. All of those virtues translate over into every other aspect of your life.
Right.
And as Bedros Keuilian is very fond of saying, fitness is the gateway drug for men's self-improvement.
I couldn't agree more than that.
Because you start working out, what's the first thing? You're not going to see changes in your body for a month. You won't see changes for a month.
Right.
But you'll have formulated a plan. You will have stuck with a plan. You will have gotten up in the morning and gone to the gym when you didn't feel like it. So you're going to keep promises to yourself. You're going to learn delayed gratification. You're going to learn how to work through pain. You're going to pick up new skills and you're going to go and do something even though you feel foolish or fat or embarrassed or whatnot. all of these things, they're going to make you a much, much better man. Much more attractive to an eventual mate when you're ready, for a relationship as well. But all of that drive and stuff that will help in business as well. Right. And part of our the image of God in us is to be creative. And you talk about so that whole erotic drive that's in us. That the French have such a beautiful word, élan vital, that vital urge that's in there. If we don't express it in sexuality, we need to use it in a way that's creative and to produce things in the world. And engaged in good, profitable business, I think, is fully Orthodox. We're participating with God in the creation of value and of bringing benefit to everyone around us.
Right.
You understand that, business is not about making money. Business is about solving other people's problems and adding value to their lives.
Right.
That's not so far from the gospel,
No,
really, it's not. And if you can do that with a pure heart and a sincere desire to see other people prosper and improve because you can help them to do that, you're worth every penny you make.
Right. And I think it's so interesting that many of the people I've seen that are very critical of all this stuff, they are not engaging in the sort of physical activities that would maintain one's body. And so it's a very easy way we want to talk about social justice and virtue signaling, but there's a real problem with piety signaling and orthodoxy and saying things or making sly comments to insinuate one's piety or more pious demeanor than another person.
Yes. More orthodox than thou.
Yeah. Yes. And so if you're going to be a monk, then that's fine. If you've decided or you feel your calling or your providence for God is to be a family, a householder, to get married, well, then that comes with a whole different set of responsibilities. And one is being able to protect those around you. And so we were speaking privately, can you tie into the sort of outlet of aggression? That was the other question, or the other side of that question I wanted to dive into, because you said bodybuilding, weightlifting is an outlet for you as well. But then also, if we're going to be men in the world, we're Orthodox men that are going to be married, that comes with a serious level of physicality, but also potential levels of violence. And that the way we maintain order is to be capable of, and that's the only way that you can be virtuous, right? You can't be virtuous if you can't beat anybody up, but if you can and you don't, now there's a virtue there.
Yes. Yeah. I remember someone quoting a monk one time who said, this was a layman. This was several years ago when I was in Cleveland. Oh, I just want to be a doormat under everybody's feet. And I remembered hearing a monk say that. And I said, okay, if you're able willingly to put yourself down there and to lay down and let people walk all over you, God bless you. There's virtue in that. But what if you're oppressed? What if you're already downtrodden? What if you don't have any power? What if you don't have any authority? What if you're just a wimpy guy and don't have a spine and everybody takes advantage of you? Is there any virtue then in being a doormat under people's feet? No. You can't help yourself. Okay? And so you're absolutely right. Let everything that we do, let it be done from a position of strength, and then we can offer our gifts voluntarily. If we are coerced into doing it or we have to comply with other people, it takes away the virtue out of it. Right. Because precisely it is coerced.
Right.
Okay? Virtue is best when it's given freely. And so we make ourselves as strong as we can. And that's not just physically. I mean, that's emotionally, that is spiritually strong as well, so that we can, as St. Paul says, bear the burdens of the weak.
Right.
Let's make ourselves economically strong as well. I was doing a marriage just a couple of weeks ago, and I'm always struck by, it comes up twice in those long prayers at our marriage service. Fill their garners with every good thing, so that having enough of everything, they may in turn give to those in need. Amazing. We want married people to have an abundance of physical goods, so that not only are they provided for, but they've got extra that they can give to somebody else. It's right there in the wedding service. And so we become the best men we can be in order to provide value and benefit to everybody around us.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love that. When we were speaking privately, you mentioned where masculinity comes from. Could you tie that into, again, virtues themselves and a man becoming a man.
Yeah, what we had talked about prior to the call was that one of the ideas that I'm working on now and trying to integrate into my own work and working with men is that, first of all, our masculinity is a gift to us from God, something that we need to be grateful for. Okay, and not to despise that, because some guys, out of some perverse sense or from poor upbringing or whatnot, don't always appreciate the fullness of that gift. But it is given to us not for self-aggrandizement. It's given to us in order that we can in turn use our masculine gifts precisely as gifts to everybody else around us.
Right.
We very often say, what are the four fundamental things that men are called to do? Procreate, protect, preside, and provide.
Right.
If we're going to procreate, we can't do it by ourselves. We need a woman.
Right.
All right. So that involves someone else. To protect, who are we going to protect? God willing, we can protect ourselves.
Right.
I think that's fundamental, and that's a good thing to do. But we also extend our protection to everybody that's in our care, be it our family, our children, perhaps our parishes, right. Perhaps our employees or people around us. Preside. Over whom do we preside? Again, over our families, over whatever realm of responsibility we have in life. And protect. We protect, we preside, we provide. Yeah, we provide for, again, not only for our own needs, but for the needs of everybody else around us. And so masculinity is ultimately not about ourselves.
Right.
That's where you get toxic or immature masculinity. Yep. Guys, I'm bigger than a woman, therefore I can be physically imposing and intimidating around everybody else.
Right.
Well, no, your size and strength were not given to you to aggrandize yourself.
Right.
They're there to be of service to people who stand in need.
Right.
The widow and the orphan, like we hear so much in the Old Testament, the prophets and all. It's there to be of service to others. And so one of the ways that I've seen, or one of sort of the lines of thought that I found really is having resonance with some of the young men who are coming to the church, is precisely this idea that you need to quit living for yourself alone and begin living for others.
Yes.
As you find ways to be of service, you take your focus off yourself and you put it on people around you. This is fundamental. The two great commandments: we love God, we love our neighbor.
Right.
Okay, you are taking our attention off ourselves. If we put our attention on God and on our neighbor, we arrive at humility, because humility is not thinking badly of yourself.
Right.
Humility is not thinking of yourself at all. And if you're engaged with being, living your life and making everybody else's life around you better, living because you have an abundance. And Christ tells us we're called to an abundant life. When we have an abundance, when we are enough, when we are the prize, we give that freely to everybody else around us.
Right.
And that's where real fulfillment comes.
Yes.
You probably had experienced that yourself.
Yes.
But there's a real deep sense of satisfaction for a man when he's provided for other people, when he's taken care of his own.
Yes. Well, you mentioned privately, tying into that, the transition from adolescence into adulthood is tied to one's consumption and production, and that a man produces more than he consumes, while a boy consumes more than he produces.
Exactly.
And then the whole Coomer meme, the person who is all, masturbating, watching porn, all they're doing is consuming the goods of immediate pleasure. And
fighting. And they produce nothing.
Go ahead.
They produce nothing.
Yeah, they produce nothing. And that's where this inversion in the world of virtue being aligning one's, political ideology. Now this is virtuous, or love is love. Like people, it's easy excuses for virtue signaling, generally speaking, as opposed to actually developing true virtue, which is always going to be butting up against real resistance for you to demonstrate virtue.
Oh yeah. I know all of that virtue is not going to demonstrate itself. So we get that. Yeah, I see that a lot. One of the things I am working on now, and sort of the basis and the structure of all of the work that I hope to be doing in workshops and individually, is precisely based on the four classical virtues of courage, moderation, prudence, and justice. A number of the fathers, excuse me, am I still here?
Yeah, you're still here. I got you.
All right. No, I'm sorry. Some application just decided to want to update itself, and the screen just vanished. Any rate, I found even in the Philokalia, like St. Peter of Damascus in Volume 2 of the Philokalia says that the four cardinal virtues of prudence, moderation, courage, and justice are the foundation on which all other virtues are built, including faith, hope, and love. Which means you need to be a man before you can be a good man. Okay.
Oh, that's a great point. Yeah.
See, Jack Donovan talks about this in his, in his Way of Men. There's a difference between being a good man and being good at being a man. And I think a lot of times the church is very poor at helping our young men become good men, or becoming men. And we're making good wussies,
right?
Which, is kind of okay, but not optimal.
Could you say that the church hasn't really had a point where masculinity was such a sort of object under attack in its history? I mean, before there was the nuclear family, men did have their children. There were grandfathers. There were uncles. It's only really a 20th century phenomenon forward that we have the total breakdown of the nuclear family, the commodification of all immediate pleasures and senses can be stimulated. So now it's a man then can live in the world, or a biological male, without ever really defining himself against the world of any sort of resistance, which is the only way, again, we define our own borders of our own personality, of our own identity. And so therefore they don't know who they are, and maybe they are a woman.
Yeah. Let's hope it doesn't go that far. No, but you're absolutely right. And it's been in my lifetime, I would think. And I remember, again, Robert Bly talking about his earlier men's. So Robert Bly published Iron John in 1990. So he's talking about the work he was doing already in the 70s and 80s. And in the introduction to that work, he says, the guys that are coming, he called them guys. They're not men, they're guys. The guys that were coming to him in those early days, they were nice. They weren't interested in hurting the planet. They were considerate of their mates. They were getting in touch with their hearts and all of this. But he said, they didn't have any energy. There's no substance to them. And what did he call them? He called them, God, I'm embarrassed now. He had a particular word for them. It was sort of like nice guys.
Oh, okay.
And then soon after, we had the era of the snags, sensitive new age guys, snags. Yeah, I remember the snags, of which we still have some doing men's work nowadays, right. Sort of the consciousness movement, sort of the kumbaya namaste sort of wing of men's work.
Yep.
I have some friends there, so they're doing some good work in their own way. But I have trouble relating.
Right.
But it's like, you read the introduction to Iron John, and it's like, my God, nothing has changed in 50 years.
Right.
Men are still the same. It's the same sort of problem. There's like a lack of spine, or Bly called it a lack of access to the wild man. There's something fundamentally raw, and masculine and almost kind of dark and dangerous that's sort of been so squelched down. But it's a vitality that we need for life. And you cannot squelch these things. You can't put a lid on it. If you do, they come back up as symptoms,
right.
And they make themselves known in unhealthy ways,
right.
in your life. And so finding some way to access sort of the fullness of our masculine being, I don't know quite how to put it, and to bring that under conscious control, and to direct all of that energy, that libido, that erotic force, all of that stuff. What the Stoics or the ancients called, the zealous and the desiring parts of the soul,
right.
To bring those under rational control, like Plato says we have to do,
right.
And then to direct them, but not to kind of squelch them. And that's what we've done today. We just sort of squelch stuff, and right. It doesn't really work.
Yeah, I talk a lot about taking more and more responsibility. I mean, this is a common theme. I'm not unique. This is echoed by Jordan Peterson or Jocko Willink or all these general people sort of speaking to men's needs right now. But I find it that some of the young guys are above average intelligence, can point out the problems, are astute in many different ways. But when it comes then to actually taking responsibility for every single thing that is actually in your control. Yes, the economy is not in our control. The Great Reset is not in our control. What the world's going to look like by 2030 is not in our control. But what goes in your mouth is in your control. What comes out of your mouth, what your body looks like, how strong, you're maintaining, your prayer life, every single thing that is in your control. Are you maximizing that? Because if you're not, stop complaining, because you are weakening and becoming more feminine just in that way, because you're insinuating through the complaining that the world somehow has control over you. And one of the things that I found so freeing is through the bodybuilding, in that I don't miss my workouts. And I haven't really missed in like 3 years. And because of that has built up this internal intensity that the only thing that can stop me is when God decides for me to die, because I'm going to get up and I'm going to do my work, not just the workouts, but whatever, if it's a stream, if it's my academic research, I'm going to get it done. And it doesn't matter who's president, doesn't matter what digital currency exists, I'm going to do that. And therefore, I am actually free, and nothing can control me besides God, which I am then trying to submit myself to in that pursuit of freedom.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. And kind of what I've seen sort of the same thing. Whenever I encounter people, yes, they're basically being reactive to the world, especially some of the young men who come to the church. Okay. There's too much of the world is still in them. So the political system, it's all screwed up.
Or all the women, right? All the women, they're
yes,
all terrible.
The red pill stuff, AWOL, all women are the same, or you're right. I don't know if it's not the, oh gosh, the European group that gets together periodically. I can't even remember their name. I don't pay attention.
Men going their own way.
Well, there's the MGTOW too. More the it's not the DeVos group. What is it? The one they get together in Switzerland. And
Davos.
Davos. Yes, the whole Davos group.
Yep, the billion.
Yeah, well, if it's not Davos, then it's the Trilateral Commission,
exactly.
Or it's John Birch Society, or come on, every generation has got its iteration of these things. And granted, there are issues there, and I'm not poo-pooing all of it, but I have absolutely no control over any of that. And you're right, especially when people are constantly reacting against that sort of stuff. It means the world is still defining their reality. The world is still defining the terms of their debate. These people are still playing on the world's turf according to their rules and their definitions, and they're going to lose.
Right.
And part of the freedom I think we have in Christ, and part of the beauty of being Orthodox, is that we can leave all of that stuff.
Right.
We can drop it. Look, what does it say in Mark's gospel? When Jesus said, follow me and I'll make you fishers of men, it says, what was it? James and John dropped their nets and went and followed Christ. The Samaritan woman at the well, she dropped her water pot and she went and said, come and see a guy that told me everything I ever did. People are not dropping their nets.
Mm-hmm.
They're dragging all of that crap into the church with them. And that's why they don't have the freedom that Christ promises us. Listen, I think ultimately the spiritual life is this. You have, and this is real rough, especially for the younger crowd. You need to leave the edges and the edgy shit for a quiet trek to the center.
Right.
And at the center, you're going to find the cross of Christ. You're going to find the peace that surpasses understanding. And you're going to find the abundant life that is promised us. And it's not going to be found with engaging the world or being a calm box cowboy trying to fight all of the last battles of the last 1,000 years. Right. It's just not there.
Right.
You have to focus on yourself.
Right. And you can do that, at least the way that I do it mentally, is a submission to God, that I pray regularly before every stream. I pray that I'm a conduit, but for me to be the best tool in the peace that God can use in the world, I have to make sure I'm pursuing, my knowledge. I'm reading, I'm praying, I'm working on my fitness, I'm getting stronger, I'm pursuing business, I'm making money that I can then provide for a wife, and that, I'm a single man, but complaining about women or the state of women or the state of dating then again insinuates a sort of disempowerment to me, that my life is providence because I am free in Christ, and therefore, you still there?
Yeah, the cat stepped on the mouse. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
so I am free in Christ, and so devoting my daily life to being the best version of myself is that everything's going to be providence, and whoever I'm going to marry, they're already there, and they're whatever the purity they need to be. I don't need to worry about any of that stuff because it's already providence. God's in control of that, because my responsibility is to only focus on what I can control, and He has control of everything else.
Yeah. And so it is actually possible to go through life with joy in our hearts and a song on our lips, even if the world is going to hell all around us.
Right.
Because we're grounded in Christ. The victory has already been won. And, it's ours. We're the beloved sons and daughters of God.
Right.
And when we can, that's what I'm really trying to work on just at the moment. We sort of know that up here, but we don't believe it in our hearts. And I'm trying to figure out a way, because if God says you're okay, you don't need anybody else's validation.
Right.
You don't need the world's validation. You don't need anybody else to tell you that you're okay. If God says you're okay, you are okay. And if you can believe that in your heart of hearts, there's no stopping you. There is no stopping you. That's a beautiful place to be.
Exactly. That's exactly it. And I've tried to mention this when I've done one-on-ones and talking with some of the Orthodox guys about building momentum in your life, is that as a man, everything is momentum, because we're not born with the same innate value as a woman. I know that in this stepping on the toes of some of the Orthodox. Oh, what do you mean we don't have this? Yes, of course we all have the same value in regard of creation and human worth, but as a man in society, you make your worth, you make your identity. You have to become something. Where a woman, if she preserves her beauty and her sexuality, her purity, there is already innate worth in that. And so there's two different games. One's the preservation of value. The other one is the making of value. And as a man, to make value in your life is all about momentum. And that is the consistency of your diet, what you do, again, the prayer life, all these things that we talked about. It's about the consistency. And when you get the consistency going, and once you're a month in, now 6 months in, now in my mind, I'm 3 years in, nobody can tell me to do something. I'm going to break my consistency. I can't break it. This is my life. It's a lifestyle.
Yeah. And it just goes. Maybe not evenly. I'm sure progress is not linear.
Right.
I know that. But you know how to grind.
Yes.
And you can keep up the grind. In good times or bad, whether you feel good or you don't feel good, you go and you grind, because you know what you need to do in order to be the man that you want to be.
Right.
And yeah, like I said earlier in the talk, it may take twice as much work and twice as long and cost twice as much money, but it's worth it. Everything worthwhile costs something.
Right.
If it were easy, we'd all be billionaires with six-pack abs.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not easy, but in today's world, it just takes that much more. I taught my boys, I said, just be 5% more effort is all it takes, and you will own everybody else in your class.
Right.
I don't think it takes 5% effort. It's 1 or 2% now.
Right.
The bar is really low.
It is. It absolutely is. And that's where for Orthodox men, the dating field is difficult. Finding a virtuous wife is difficult, but therefore the only option is for you to become the best version of yourself, so that you get that woman and not some other man who isn't Orthodox, who isn't Christian, who doesn't have the right values.
Yeah.
The only option is to compete. And that's where it's like the freedom is in the competition. And that's also the hurdle for a lot of people when they're starting at point zero and they have no momentum in any aspect of their lives, whether it be fitness or business or spiritual. And so they got to get over that hurdle. But you have to get that momentum, that snowball effect has to get going, because that's the only thing that then contributes to the meaning. So whether I want to do something or not, the reason why I do it is because I always feel better. And I feel so good about the life because of the momentum and the discipline and the habits that you couldn't pay me to stop it, because of the way that one feels.
Yeah. I wouldn't do anything else than what I'm doing now.
So
really.
Can you speak then to this foundation and how this comes back then to, I would say, Christ, orthodoxy, and why orthodoxy? Why young men um, need that sort of traditional foundation. You're talking about Father 2.0, a priest, the hierarchy. Tradition itself is paternal wisdom handed down. It's not something, oh, well, I don't need religions made by men. Okay, but that tradition, whatever tradition, we don't have to get into apologetics among religions. It's still wisdom passed on from generation to generation.
Yeah. Why do you want to start at square one? I mean, my God, take advantage of everybody else who's mucked it up, in our case for 2,000 years and told us, don't go that way. You'll fall off the edge. There's quicksand over here. Just trust us on this. Don't go there. Here's the narrow path. Just stay this way and you'll be okay. No?
Right.
I think, again, one of the reasons that Orthodoxy is as attractive as it is, particularly to young men, as I said, there is a real desire for structure and for stability, for truth with a capital T,
yes,
that they can really stand on and be grounded in, and they know that it's not going to change. So Orthodoxy, I think, has this reputation for unchanged truth,
right,
which we need to maintain.
Yeah,
which we do, but I mean, I think we can't go fudging on that
right.
In the least. And so when
that's why we need strong men to defend it, to know it,
yes,
and then stand firm on it and not move.
Yeah, and largely that that relies that falls on the shoulders of our hierarchs and our clergy. So always pray for your bishops and your priests, please. Yeah. We don't have to get into issues that that in there, but there are issues. But the church is always under attack. But we know what the tradition is, and we know what Christ expects of us. And so if we are willing to do what the church tells us to do, traditional Orthodox observance, the daily kind of stuff, to have a rule of prayer. Mm-hmm. The alarm clock goes off, you don't hit snooze and roll over. You get your ass out of bed. In my case, I go downstairs because the coffee pot has already been set to go off. I get my cup of coffee, and me and Jesus have quality time. Right. Okay. And I do my rule of prayer first thing in the morning, because I wake up at 5, whether I set an alarm or not. I've just done that for years. And my wife wakes up 2 or 3 hours later, and nobody wants me at 5 a.m. So for me, it's the optimal time for me to pray and to read the scriptures and to do my spiritual work, to pray for my congregation. So you get up and you do that. Or, you take your cold shower, or you get in your workout, you rack up those little wins over the course of the day. It really does change your mindset. My younger son he amazed me. He discovered this thing called a morning ritual. He's 29 years old. This is beautiful. It's just beautiful. Yeah, I get up and I drink a glass of water and I do 30 push-ups and then I say my prayers. And it's like the rest of the day is so great. I'm glad you found that, son. I've only been doing it for years, but anyway, but so the ordinary aspects of Orthodox observance, the simple things, the daily rule of prayer, keeping the fasts and the feasts as a regular rhythm of life, even when feasts come around, have a nice craft beer, open a nice bottle of wine with your dinner, celebrate the day and carry on that celebration a little more. Sanctify time and space. Have a nice icon corner in your home, which is the focus of your spirituality. Make regular time, attend all the services that you can. Just standing in the Orthodox temple, since it's a microcosm of the whole universe, helps to put our souls and our hearts and our minds all back in alignment. Just being there is a grace and a therapy. And being in a good Orthodox community where, you don't get to pick your family members, you don't get to pick your parishioners either.
True, yeah.
You have to put up with, crazy Aunt Sally, or weird Uncle Ted or whatever it is. And we learn, though, that it doesn't, I have a typical parish. I have, in COVID, I had everyone from the triple vaxxed and double masked all the way over to people who would take no vaccines because Jeff Bezos was going to introduce nanobots into his body.
Yeah.
I had the entire spectrum. There was no way for me to navigate that other than simply to do what the bishop told me to do with regards to policy, and all. But what I'm saying is we all have to learn to get along with everybody, regardless of whatever views. And learning to do that teaches us patience and humility, and sometimes to keep our own damn mouths shut so that we don't offend other people. And just doing all of those sorts of things, to commune regularly, to venerate the icons, and not, haphazardly,
Right.
slapping out a cross and, just kissing the corner of the icon, but doing it with intention and focus. All of these little things really do help to sanctify our lives. They help to bring us closer to God. They provide a discipline and a rhythm against the chaos and the disorder of the rest of the world. And we can rest in that. And it's comprehensive. We can do it at home, we can do it at church. And once it gets established in our hearts and in our lives, then, the gates of hell are not going to prevail against us.
Right.
And we can go through the day, regardless of how bad anything else gets, knowing that we are children of God and that He has us in the palm of His hand.
Right.
And that's genuine freedom, and that's genuine peace.
Yeah.
And we have that, and we can offer it to people.
Yeah.
And again, I think it's especially the structure, because Orthodoxy has got a lot of structure, and young men are desperate for it.
Right.
So,
And
if
it's a difficult spirituality, especially if you're coming from Protestantism or New Age or occultism. It's way easier. And so that difficulty, I think, is attractive for a lot of young men as well.
I think there's a challenge there. I think Jack Donovan, the last time I was talking with him, pointed out there is a certain aesthetic
Yes.
to Orthodoxy as well. Sort of the death to the world crowd, also that black and white grainy kind of images of skulls and that sort of thing, which is traditional and authentic.
Yeah.
It kind of grabs the imagination of a certain segment of the young male population as well.
That's absolutely. I mean, within a culture that we have now, where, at least within Christianity, I would argue, and I would make a strong argument that the only way you can really find a masculine Christianity is within Eastern Orthodoxy. That Catholicism or trad Catholicism had it in a way, I think, post-Vatican II, and as we've seen the movement of who I call Pope Frank, it is becoming more and more feminized, more and more ecumenical, more and more everything we would imagine it would be post-Vatican II. And so if you're as a man, I did a video recently on regarding what are you willing to die for, and that if you're going to be a man in the world, a serious question, and also a monk. I mean, a monk's already made that decision, and they've died to the world to become a monk. But if you're going to be in the world, and we are Orthodox, we're dying in a way to live for Christ, but in a real way, like, what are you willing to die for? Because if there aren't boundaries in which you're going to turn around and actually resist something, you might as well go be a monk, because you can't protect the people that you then are signing up for through your crown of martyrdom during marriage.
Yeah, and you go back very often to boundaries, and I think Orthodoxy helps us to establish good, reasonable, and firm boundaries.
Yeah.
The whole idea of guarding the heart, which is what the Jesus prayer is about,
right.
To set a perimeter around our heart so that, the fiery darts of the evil one are not allowed to penetrate in, to set a perimeter around our life, around our homes, around our families. This is warrior work,
Exactly.
If you think about warrior archetype, where were the warriors, in old societies? They weren't at home in the village. They were out on the perimeter, guarding the edges so that everything inside could take place in peace. And I think you're right. Orthodoxy still has a strong sense of that. So we establish the boundaries of the perimeter and keep that firm so that the rest of life, especially the life in the heart, can flourish.
Right. And because it has those boundaries, it has a perimeter for men to defend. And that's then the ultimate self-sacrificial calling, the ultimate archetype, the hero's journey, the ultimate following in Christ and carrying your own cross is taking on the work to make your life a self-sacrifice for other people. And then if you're in the church, obviously all these puzzle pieces begin to fall into place where you can see the grand picture a little bit more clear, I would argue.
Yeah. And I will just throw this in too. In addition to boundaries, one of the things I focus on early on in all of my men's work is establishing good boundaries. And hand in hand with that is good assertiveness training. Learning how not to be aggressive, not to be passive, not to be passive aggressive, but how to be appropriately assertive in order to speak your truth, to say how you feel, what you want, the willingness and ability to say no, and that no is a complete sentence. You don't have to explain, excuse, rationalize, or defend yourself.
Right.
You know, um, and all of those things. And I found that if you can get people to understand good assertiveness and appropriate boundaries, that's like the first 3 months of therapy. And it really takes care of a whole lot of people's problems if they can just get through that. Right. So I found that to be some of the most helpful, fundamental stuff, especially for young men to learn.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We have a few super chats here. I don't mean to keep you too long. I was going to show everybody what your TikTok looked like and share that link for everybody TikTok, so they could, and I'll share the Instagram as well for anybody who would like to follow Father Michael Butler, and again, a lot of his work talking to young men. So here's just a sneak peek. I'm just going to click on a random video here. Let's see, this one's quite popular. We'll click on this. Oh, let me turn the speaker on here. And so for young men, here is the TikTok link that I will share for you. This is now in the live chat for anybody who would be interested. There is that. And so here is, we'll just click on a few videos. And if you want to expound a little bit further or not, we can, but just to show people some of the quick work. And then again, TikTok is incredibly degenerate. Anybody who gets on there to create content can see that. But the videos that you make, go ahead.
The only reason I am there is because Bedros Keuilian, because he was coaching me in business, says, my market is on Instagram right now. But it's very difficult to grow an audience on Instagram nowadays, the way it's set. TikTok is the only organic market now. And even though it's mostly young people, older people are beginning to move into TikTok. And my target audience will be there within the next year or two. And people doing men's work, men's self-development, positive masculinity, that sort of stuff, there are not that many of us. So I'm kind of getting into TikTok to be on the ground level so that when my audience eventually comes, they will find me.
Right.
Yeah, that's kind of what but you're right. It is Sodom and Gomorrah.
It is. And I'm also now on TikTok trying to create some fitness content. But it is because the algorithm, it is the only organic platform. My Instagram following, I grew basically once 2020 happened, and we know what happened in 2020 because of the problematic things that I posted on Instagram. My Instagram has not grown. It's basically the exact same. I'll still get followers. I don't know what's going on, but I have not grown at all. And so
I've picked up maybe 150 on Instagram in like 3 months, and on TikTok 3 weeks ago, one of my posts went viral.
Oh, really?
850,000 views, 100,000 likes,
wow,
2,000 comments, and I went from 2,100 followers to like I think I'm at 19,000 now.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. You're gaining traction over on TikTok, and that's what I was going to show everybody is that the videos that you post are very simple, precise, concise, and real utilities for young men. And so we'll have to find the one that went viral here and play that.
It's about four lines, but it's the only one with like 870,000.
Wow.
views.
Well, here's what I just clicked on. I'm not sure what the topic it is, but we'll. This is your segment on Man Talks Over Coffee.
Oh yes. Okay.
In the hardest moments of life, you can experience the purity of masculinity, which is stability and strength in the face of chaos. In the rage, in the grind. Hey guys. One of the ways that we can distinguish between a good guy and a nice guy is that a nice guy does what other people want. A good man does what is necessary for himself and for his own. Hey guys, stuff you should have learned from your dad or from your granddad. Men socialize by insulting each other, but they don't really mean it. Women socialize by complimenting each other, but they don't really mean it either.
Yes, that's the one that went viral.
Oh, that's the one that went viral?
Yeah, because, am I being serious or am I busting chops there too?
Hey guys.
Yeah, it's just hysterical, and And the guys who grew up, with locker room banter, busting each other's chops and whatnot, they loved it. The women loved it all too. But you could always find those guys who never quite understood how that interaction worked, because they just hated it.
Well, it is true though. Anybody that's played sports knows that that's how guys build camaraderie and enjoy each other's company. Is that you do insult each other, and it's not. It's not in a mean way at all. It's just what you do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's it. And like I say, it's actually kind of a subtle form of communication. You really have to trust people well to do it, and to know them well. And because the idea is I'm going to insult you, but you're going to give it back just as good as you got from me, and that's what makes it fun.
Right.
And. Some people just don't understand that, and I know in some cases, I've dealt with people who are on the spectrum, a little bit, and who just really don't get jokes or don't get sarcasm or just are not able to understand irony, and for them it's just completely beyond them. But most people, the occasional guy who's just gonna get kind of butt hurt because you poked fun at him rather than slinging it right back at you. Okay, it's unfortunate, but. So there are some people like that out there.
And it points towards, which is an absolute fact, at least in my experience as a man, is some of the guys that I dislike the most and end up getting in the physical altercations with, physical fights, especially if it was like a decent fight, you almost become friends, close friends afterwards. And then if it was a fight where maybe you got the best of the other guy, you often feel sad about it. That's another thing that men don't talk about, is when you actually do knock somebody out and you see them helpless, you don't always feel great about that. There's something a little bit remorseful about it. But ironically, the people you fight with as men often become your best friends.
Yeah.
So
it's true. But that one was fun. And I happened to be out of town up in rural Maine at an event. And suddenly I was paying attention to the event, and I went back. I usually post about 6 a.m, and then I went back about noon. It's like, my God, there's like 60,000 views already. What happened to this?
Wow.
And then, it was like by the end of the day, it had topped 100,000. By the next morning, there was like 200,000. I said, Lord, what's going to happen to this? It's been amazing, and it also, I tell you what, though. It showed me the danger in social media popularity. I really had to learn a lesson. There is so much validation that comes from people liking a post you put out. I had some days it was hard not to want to look and see, how many more have liked that. There's real danger there. You have to, you really do have to have some strength of character if you're going to be on social media regularly. And
that is a fact. I think one of the things that is helpful is somebody, because that's kind of my catch-22, is my whole business is putting content out in the world, is trying to stay as so busy that you don't have time. And so just as a man, that way you don't fall in the trap of just the social media trap of watching all the likes appear and getting all the congratulations and the gratification from other people. But that's definitely a real thing. But I love your content. I think it's so useful for people, especially young men. It's so quick and concise, in that you're on TikTok, in that you are relatable Orthodox priest, and you're talking about very useful, pragmatic things regarding masculinity. And that's only going to have a positive impact long term for a lot of these guys. And that's where I think we have to put some type of positive content on TikTok. And so I've met some of the other Orthodox guys that have bigger Orthodox channels on TikTok. And that's what they do. They take whatever's catchy and clever that the kids are doing, they repackage the music or whatever they're using, and they create it as a sort of Orthodox themed, and they'll get 60,000 likes or something. It's like, hey, well, that's a lot. Those are young people that are not Orthodox or know what that is, but the appeal of the tradition or the masculinity or fighting against the control system, the censorship that we know that is present, that is appealing to non-Orthodox people. And so if they see men that are embodying that reality and then are a part of a tradition that's historical, eventually they're going to ask more questions. And that's where the apologetics is really just living our lives. Becoming the best version of yourself is the best way to be apologetic in regards to our faith.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like I say, that's just kind of what I do. And you can do it with joy in your heart and a song on your lips.
Right.
That's kind of the way I try to do it. And, don't let the haters get you down.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, God bless you, Father. Thank you so much for coming on. We have some super chats. If you have a few minutes, we can go through some of the comments people have.
Yeah. Go right ahead. I'm sorry, I can't talk and keep up with the chat at the same time. So if you've been doing that, or you're, I'll thumb through it. But if there's some good questions or whatnot,
no, I got them. At least the super chats, they've already been sent in over here. Gotcha. So first one comes from Dr. Vagisil, throws in $2. And he says, Genesis shows that most core things about being a man is setting boundaries and enforcing rules and being accountable. Even when our spouse is doing things against God's will, we need to be steadfast.
Truth.
Agreed. Thank you very much, Dr. Vagisil. I think he sent in another one, so we'll see him come back here around. Okay. Next one comes from Ortho Paul Lee. So Paul Lee throws in $5 and says, hope you find a wife soon, brother. Saw you at Waffle House at 2 a.m. asking random women if they were based in ortho build.
I'm sure that wasn't you.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't me. I haven't been to Waffle House in a minute, but and I probably wouldn't be out at 2 a.m. I'm old man. I'm all about those gains, so I try to get bed early so I can wake up and go to the gym.
That's right.
But that is funny. So thank you so much, Ortho Paul, for the $5. It says, I hope you find a wife soon, brother. I saw you at the Waffle House at 2 a.m. asking random women if they were based in ortho build. Thank you very much, Paul. Next super chat comes from Pim Orsos, one of our good Orthodox brothers here, says, you don't like basketball? Man, you're missing out. I think that was in regards to when you're talking about you don't like sports.
I know. My wife is fond of baseball, so sometimes I will sit through a baseball game. Honestly, I marched in band in high school, so I used to watch high school football all the time, and was in Dallas. So Dallas was actually football. A decent team.
Yeah, Texas football is like basketball in Indiana. I mean,
yeah, I know it is the real religion there. But kind of when Dallas went south, I gave up on football. So
it is what it is. Yeah.
And I the older I've gotten, I've discovered that I do need a post liturgical nap on Sundays. It's mostly from consuming the chalice at the end of liturgy. The wine just goes straight to my head. So I Sunday afternoon football or whatnot, it's just not going to happen. I'm going to be asleep. So,
well, we appreciate your honesty, Father. That's great. Yeah. Next super chat comes from one of my good buddies and godson, Dr. Michael Moeller. Throws in $25 and says, reject modernity and embrace orthodoxy. Love your work, Father Michael. God bless.
I think I just found him on TikTok or Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's a doctor out in Southern California. He does hormone therapy.
Yeah, he
I just found him yesterday.
Oh, yeah, that's he's actually one of my good buddies. We were doing ayahuasca ceremonies before I became Orthodox, and so
oh God, plant medicine, it's everywhere.
Yeah, I know. So we've both been on a long journey, and I was very fortunate and humbled that he asked me to be his sponsor earlier this year. So it was back in the end of April or May that he got brought into the Orthodox Church out there in St. Barnabas in Costa Mesa. So we had, shout out to Dr. Mo, and he has his own own clinic there in SoCal. And so
I think I sent him a direct message. He's probably not answered yet, but I found him. God, there are, just watching a few of his videos, we have a number of things in common as well. And I thought this would be a fun conversation just to
you guys definitely should. You guys definitely should chat. In fact, maybe we can do another one. I'll have you and Michael on And we
It'd
can
be
just
fun.
do all three of us and find a men's topic and just sort of bat that around for an hour or so.
It'd be fun. Yeah, I'm up for that.
Okay. Well, yeah, we'll definitely have to do that. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Mo, for the super chat. Again,
Do I know what a ayahuasca ceremony is? Yes, yes. I have not gone there myself, but yeah. The education of an Orthodox priest extends into very dark and
yeah.
unsavory parts of human experience.
Yeah, I'm
so,
sure confession is education hour for you.
Yeah.
Well, shout
especially
out
especially with the younger people that are coming in nowadays, because they've all done all of that stuff.
Right. I mean, that's I did all that stuff, and I've talked about before, and it's sort of providence because now that's kind of my bridge. That's one of the sort of main features of my ministry is reaching to people that practice magic and was into psychedelics, because I've done all that stuff, aware all that, read all those books, got those T-shirts, and now I'm over here as Orthodox, and so then trying to explain all that, it's been quite useful. So again, God's providence. It's funny how when I, on my journey, he needed to meet me in altered spaces, and he did, and that ended my journey. In fact, ironically, it actually ties to something we were talking about today. The last time I did psychedelics was an ayahuasca ceremony with Dr. Mo, and it was what prompted me to create this YouTube channel, and that the whole realization was that Christ was a carpenter and that he built, and that I had been a consumer, and that it was time for me to build something instead of consume something. And so that about a month and a half after that, I went full time and have produced about 3 videos every single week for 3 years.
Yeah, you have a lot of content. Kudos on that.
Well, I thank you very much. It's I feel obligated at this point. I can't not do it. So
yeah, I don't have quite so much time. There should be a number of more longer videos, more substantive, working out ideas. It's hard to do substantive things on a 30-second TikTok or Instagram video.
But look at the people you reach. You just had one that had 800,000 views. So clearly the little snippets, I mean, that's what people really share and look at. Like things under a minute are what people watch.
But it's hard to go deep in under a minute. Right. So,
well, that's the next avenue of your public journey is the podcast. So eventually you'll have your own podcast, but again, that's what your coach, right? You're just building the audience.
Here, let me, thank you for mentioning that. Yes. Kindly watch, probably by the end of the year, Iron Sharpens Iron will be a new podcast on Ancient Faith Radio. And Father Hans Jacobsi.
Oh yes.
And good heavens, Robson. And I forgot Mr. Robson's first name. I'm embarrassed now. Paul Robson, who is in Denmark.
Okay.
Orthodox Christian guy, runs the Manifesto men's organization in Scandinavia. And myself will be doing a joint podcast. So I'll have some individual episodes on that. So there'll be some longer form discussion on some of these topics.
Yeah, I was wanting to ask Father Hans to come on and talk again about men's issues and stuff like that, because he's been very vocal. And I remember at the beginning of creating this YouTube channel, I did a review of a talk he did talking with young men in regards to porn addiction and masturbating and all that different stuff. And
he has some good work there, and he's had some success there as well. He's a good man. I like working with him.
Yeah. I'm going to reach out to him and hope that he's able to come on, maybe have a conversation as well. So that's great. Well, Iron Sharpens Iron. That'll be coming when?
By the end of the year, I hope.
End of the year.
We're going to be churning out like the first 3 episodes here in the next week, and then whenever they get up and the artwork gets completed and the intro jingle gets, the things about which I know nothing that have to be done before you can do a podcast. So,
right.
This is why the good men at Ancient Faith are there to help us.
There you go. Next one comes from Vanessa Rios. Shout out to Vanessa Rios. God bless you. She throws $4.99 in and just says, God bless. Well, thank you so much, Vanessa.
Much obliged.
Evan 513 throws in $5 and no comment. Well, thank you so much, Evan513. Pim Orsos, again, our good ortho brother, throws in $10, an extra $10, no comment. Well, thank you so much, Pim. Parker Mize throws in $1.99, no comment. Well, thank you so much, Parker Mize. Simon the amputee. Father, I got to tell you about, this is a gentleman you should probably, I'll send you his Instagram profile over on Instagram. A great Orthodox guy that I was able to meet in Southern California. That embodies the sort of masculine mentality we have. Unfortunately, he doesn't have his lower limbs, and he still mountain climbs. He posts, mile, very long mile hikes, very high altitudes. And so God bless Simon the amputee. What a great man. I told him he inspires me to see the perseverance that he has. Makes me not want to complain. And so he throws in for $19.99. He says, excellent stream, gentlemen. There's nothing worse than a man who complains. And amen to that. Shout out to you, Simon. God bless you and the family, man, and keep doing everything you do, man. You're an inspiration. Next super chat comes from Dr. Vagisil again for $1. Says, notice how feminists love when women do self-destructive things, but go crazy when women do anything that is helpful towards a man. It is a Jezebel spirit, and it has an eroding effect on men in society when enough women adopt that mindset.
I think there's truth in that. I don't remember the quote. There's something I'd read a while back on. It was talking about the fact that young women don't know how to cook. Well, neither do young men. Nobody knows how to cook anymore. It amazes me. But part of the reason is because they were sort of taught that cooking for somebody else is kind of a submissive thing, and that no strong, independent woman should be doing things like that for a man. And so they don't. It feeds into not learning the skill. Then you end up spending huge amounts of money on takeout, which is it's actually just wasteful. Learn to cook for yourself. And then someone told me, I don't look at anime or hentai or anything, but this article went on and said, maybe some of you can relate to this. It says, if you ever look at any of those comic books and there's a relationship, there's a boy or a girl, as soon as the girl gets interested in the boy, what's the first thing she does? She makes him a home-cooked meal and puts it in little boxes and then gives it to him. And this is sort of like, like we are now dating. Right. Kind of statement. And it was a willingness for her to show kindness and to perform an act of service for this guy. Mm-hmm. And like I said, I have no idea if it's true or not, but it sounds like the kind of thing that that would take place.
It is true. I spent 2 summers in China, and from my little bit of life experience, when I briefly was speaking with a young Chinese girl there, that was actually one of the first things she did is like she wanted to make food and bring it over and eat together what she cooked and like it was almost like a very motherly sentiment. Not that she thought of it that way. That's part of their culture, and exactly what you're talking about, the way that the woman relates to the man and shows that of a sort of intimacy is that she will literally make the food and then you guys come together and eat it together. And that's like something that women like to do. And so that's a very different spirit than in the West with the general Western woman, which, definitely wouldn't be have that approach to establishing intimacy with a man.
And there is absolute truth to it. I'm proof positive. When my wife and I were dating, she came over to my apartment and, being a nosy woman, looked in my refrigerator and in my freezer. And in the freezer, it was like stacked completely full of banquet chicken pot pies. There's a backstory. I'm very fond of chicken pot pies, and there's a reason for that. But I had a lot of them because they were on sale. And she said nothing. But a week later, I was invited to her house, to her apartment for dinner. And she had made me a homemade chicken pot pie. I didn't know such things were possible. I had never had a homemade chicken pot pie. It was the most wonderful thing I had ever put past my lips. She won my heart through my stomach that day. I freely admit it. I came cheap. But to this day, a homemade chicken pot pie is my favorite meal. And I
Wow.
rejoice that my sons have grown up and moved out, because now there are leftovers and I get to enjoy it more than once.
Nice. Jeez,
Yeah.
well, hopefully that is my romantic love story there, as a woman wins my heart through my stomach.
It's an easy path. Yeah, you'll fall hard and fast if it happens.
Oh, next super chat comes from our good buddy, Orthodox brother Jared Fetzer, throws in $5 and says, I love the perspective Father Michael brings. I know for myself, as a 28-year-old man, I was drawn to Orthodox Christianity because I've always wanted a godly father figure in my life, and that is the very thing our society is lacking in many cases.
Yes. Yeah. All of the masculine figures in popular culture are all toxic or immature. From the buffoon dad in sitcoms,
Yep.
To the abusive father, to the bad guy, the shady character, the incompetent at work. Every instance of an adult male is distorted in popular culture. It's very hard to find them. Which, if your contributor there, he says he's 28 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Look, you're never too young to be a positive influence in the life of somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I get it. Yeah, I've sort of, in the last year or so, I've really sort of felt like I've grown into a kind of maturity that I didn't have before. It started when I started getting gray in my eyebrows. That's the sign that you're really beginning to be an old man, when your eyebrows go gray. But I've just got much more comfortable. Sort of, okay, I'm an old man now. I can be Papa. I can be Grandpa. I can say those kinds of things with a certain authority because I have the look.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just milking that for all that it's worth right now, especially in my social media accounts. But you don't have to be 60 plus or 50 plus in order to be a positive influence. Fathering is something that we can all do, young men as well as old. And as Patrick was saying earlier, establishing boundaries, protecting or defending people who stand in need of that. And I'll tell you something else that we haven't talked about here very much, but is huge. Affirmation, gratitude for what another man does, and praise. I cannot tell you how deeply appreciative I found that to be when I just say, I was at the gym today. There was some guy prepping up powerlifting meet. He was benching 365. I just stopped what I was doing and just sat. I was doing volume work on bench press myself, so I wasn't doing heavy weights, just doing a bunch of high rep stuff. Every time he went to, I just stopped and sat there and watched it because it was just so damned impressive. He's 19 years old and he's benching 365.
Whoa, 19! Oh my gosh!
This is incredible, and I told him so, and you could see him beam with pride. Not many other people were paying that much. He had a spotter. There's another guy who was spotting him, and then that's just stupendous. It's so beautiful to see a young man able to do that. Do it again. And you know what he did. So even if you're a young man, find enough security. You're enough. You got enough. You're enough of the prize. You're sufficient unto yourself to where you can give a word of affirmation, of praise, of gratitude to somebody else and not feel like you're losing anything yourself.
Right.
Okay. So do that. Be an encouragement to everybody around you. It's a stupendous gift.
Yeah.
And anybody can do that. And the world is desperate. Men especially are desperate for that word of, really for the blessing of a father.
Yeah.
It's either in a religious sense or just even in a secular sense, but a real blessing and the acknowledgement of another man. So if you're 28, what you can say to a 23-year-old or a 19-year-old can change the course of his life. Take the opportunity to do that, please. If at any time it comes up, just be a positive influence like that. It's an incredible gift.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Jared, the gentleman who asked the question, he's 28. He has 2 boys, he's married, and his wife is pregnant with a third. So he got started. I'm much older, still single, and he's already got a full family over there. So shout out to Jared. God bless you and the family. But I think that's a great point of the inability of men to congratulate or acknowledge other men. And I've noticed that in my own life, it's the most competent men in my life that are always the quickest to give congratulations, because you're not a threat to their own self-image or the things that they're working towards, and that it's a very juvenile approach for a man to feel overly jealous or threatened by another man's success one way or another, and that if you really are focusing on everything that's in your control, you're not threatened by anything. You're doing the best you can do, and you acknowledge then when somebody can step a little further or has achieved maybe where you haven't achieved yet.
Yeah. Yeah. But again, it comes from that whole sense of abundance, of knowing that you're sufficient for yourself, that whole self-confidence that comes from all of the things that we've talked about, throughout this talk, from your physical fitness, from getting good at your job, to, doubling down on your education, to getting those certifications you need, to, putting yourself out there and taking risks. All of that stuff feeds into it. And when you're comfortable doing that, you're right. You don't see other men as competition.
Right.
There really isn't any competition out there. There's cooperation.
Yeah.
I mean, all of the most successful men are always coordinating with each other, just exactly like what we're doing right now, you and me.
Right, exactly.
You know?
And another thing, too, this is a sort of a subtle tangent, but tied to a video that I saw you mention about young men taking care of their appearance. But out of the men that I know that are competent, successful, that have created their own business, no matter what field or enterprise it is, they also are self-conscious of how they look and how they appear to other people, whether they have a style to themselves or just the put-togetherness of the way they look. I've never met a man, at least in my own experience, that is like really a go-getter and like really successful in life that isn't conscientious of how he looks. It's not about being superficial. It's about a reality. The way we look is a way that we first judge somebody, and it's not superficial. If somebody is in rags versus somebody who's dressed nice, it's a measurement. It's a quick sort of judgment, but it's not irrational. It's a rational sort of categorization. And so take advantage of that. Demonstrate who you are with the way that you present yourself. It's not that you have to sit and stare at yourself in the mirror all the time. That's not what we're saying.
No, you don't get a second chance to make a good first impression. And if you have something of value, if you want to be heard, if you want to make an impression, if you want to be taken seriously, yeah, there are certain expectations, and we may not particularly care for them, but those are the ones that we have to meet.
Right.
And if it helps you along and gets you what you want in life, yeah, do those things. I mean, this is it's not central. This is low-hanging fruit. This is stuff you should be taking care of, without even thinking about it, so that once these little easy things are in place, then you can focus on the more difficult aspects of getting your life together. Mm-hmm. But just build the normal habits, of them. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, like you said, take yourself seriously. I've mentioned this before. I did a stream talking about fashion and how you match ties and shirts and jackets and all this different stuff. But the informality of our society is repercussive in the way that we speak to each other, but also the way we dress. So now people go to work with sweatpants on, where in the early 20th century, they wouldn't have done that. They would have a top hat, they would have a three-piece suit, and that would have been tied then to the formality, which is a sort of motif or a meme, the way people used to speak English. But that formalism of language was tied to the formalism of appearance. And so the breakdown in formality, the breakdown in boundaries themselves, has led to informality in all aspects. The way we communicate, the way we text and we talk, like we can't even use full words.
And it also creates more social friction. This was a brilliant point that was made to me several years ago. The reason that we say please and thank you and yes sir and no sir and after you and hold doors for each other and all that sort of stuff is because we voluntarily withdraw ourselves a little bit to create more space for the other person to be himself. It reduces social friction. It makes every interaction smoother, quicker, more efficient, and more effective.
Wow, that's a great point.
That's just what it does. And so when everybody's chummy and uses your first name and is in your face and are not polite and all of that, we get friction. And then anxiety goes up, trust goes down, society as well. And all of the effects are deleterious. So just a little bit of formality And those old fashioned sort of things that mom and dad taught you to do, the yes or the no sir sort of stuff, really go a long way.
Right.
And they make life easier. They really do.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think that again, if our lives are going to be the way that we apologize our faith and spread our faith, I think just being a little bit self-conscious, not doesn't mean you have to be overly focused on clothing or spending a bunch of fashion, but just the way you look to people and making sure that you look the best. Have your shirt pressed. That was not, I talked about starching your shirt. Do you know how to starch do you know how to starch your collar? Like just so your shirt looks nice. Just minor things.
Pro tip. If you ever travel, and you need to travel like for business or you need dress clothes, take your shirts to the laundromat, have them or the dry cleaners, have them laundered, pressed, folded, and ironed with a light starch. They'll come packaged the way they look like when you buy them in the store. They will have a light starch, which makes them crisp and cool when you put them on, which is a uniquely masculine experience, and they will not be wrinkled on the other end.
Right. It's a great point.
It's really worth doing. It's spending the extra money and doing that, but you will look absolutely spectacular.
Right.
Unless you're willing to iron in the hotel room. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a little portable iron I take with me. Because I hate wearing dress shirts that aren't pressed. It drives me absolutely insane. It looks terrible.
There you go.
But Father, thank you so much for coming on here and being generous with your time. Really, really supportive and love the work that you're doing online, especially spreading advocacy and support for men and men's issues right now in a world in which is actively trying to destroy the category of man itself. So is there anything that you would like to say? I'll have, when we get off here, I'll put your Instagram and your TikTok links here in the video description. Is there anything you'd like to say to anybody before we get off here, or where people can find you if they want to reach out to you and speak more to you? What's the best way to do that?
Yeah, as I say, sort of the same handle, average to alpha, is on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. So it's exactly the same name. You can look me up there. I'm also at Holy Transfiguration Orthodox Church in Livonia, Michigan. I think I put it in the chat. There's like orthodoxlivonia.org. You can find me there, if anything. And if I can be of service, I'm happy to be of service. And if in anything that I've said that I've caused you offense, forgive me for that. It's not my intention to cause you offense. If anything, maybe give you something to think about. But I don't set out to be offensive on purpose. So forgive me if in anything I've said this caused that. And I think that's it. Otherwise, go out. I know there are some women here too. Look, go out and be the best man you can be. Go out and be the best woman that you can be. Strive to be the best and to optimize your life in every way, because that's what gives glory to God. That will give you the greatest satisfaction in your own life. It will provide value to yourself and to everybody else around you. And I came a little late in life to some of these realizations. And if I can get some of you younger people not to waste decades of your life or to live with the kind of regret I live with because I was so slow to pick up on some of these things, then I've done good work. So go and be the best you can. Go with God's blessing. And thank you. Thank you for being attentive. This was wonderful.
Well, thank you. We really appreciate it. And I will be back either tomorrow or Friday with my introduction video on Buddhism. So I will see you guys then.